Artemi Panarin scores twice and has an assist in the Rangers' blowout win over the Flyers, but were those his final points as a Ranger?
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1467 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, and we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the number 1 sports podcast network. So the Rangers finally won a game. They take on the Flyers 6-3 on Saturday afternoon. A lot to talk about here today. A lot of big discussion points coming out of this game. We got a hat trick from Mika Zibanejad, so we'll obviously talk about that and also discuss what the future might hold for Mika. Is there any chance that he could be on the move? He seems less likely than some of the other Ranger veterans, but I suppose we could say never as it pertains to Mika. Also, Brennan Othmann finally scores his first goal in the NHL. Going to have some thoughts and on him, and as well as Gabe Perreault and a potential, at least semi-youth movement for the New York Rangers. But we begin with Artemi Panarin, because as I'm watching this game, I mean, to begin with, let me just say, it was really, really nice to see Artemi Panarin, Mika Zibanejad, Vincent Trocheck, Alexis Lafreniere. All these guys had multiple point games. All these guys that have been so key to some of these Ranger teams that have gone on some deep playoff runs and had some very special moments. And obviously things have gone south in a heck of a hurry these past 2 seasons here. But at the very least, if this is sort of a swan song, we got one last awesome game out of this core group of players. And who's to say how many of them will still be on this team, a couple of weeks from now, a month from now. I mean, the deadline is still a decent ways away. I believe we're looking at about 7 weeks at this point. So we'll see. It's not for sure that anything is imminent. But be that as it may, it was nice to see all these guys perform, not the least of which was of course, Artemi Panarin. You've got the game-tying goal in the first period. This is right after the Flyers have made it 1-0. Panarin scores a goal. There was just some great passing here, a turnover by the Flyers. Lafreniere went right up the center of the ice, passed over to Panarin. Panarin back to Lafreniere over the blue line. Lafreniere left it for Vincent Trocheck. Trocheck's moving to his right. Trocheck passes back to his left to Panarin. And Panarin, I mean, 100 times out of 100, he's scoring on this one. I mean, he's not going to mishandle this pass. He's not going to miss the wide open net. This is beautiful. And it felt like it was straight out of 2023, 2024, when this line was just so unstoppable. I mean, they were so dangerous on the rush. And, you just look at how it was back then, and it's only 2 years later. And I mean, yeah, everybody's a little bit older, but it shouldn't be such a rarity when these 3 players combine for a goal like this. And I realize they haven't all been on the same line for the entire season, but I mean, you see something like this, it's just like, man, where has this been? Because we saw it so many times, as recently as 2 seasons ago. So as frustrating as that's been, it was nice to see this here, and obviously nice to see Panarin cap it off with a goal there. I mean, that's just a goal that he's simply not going to miss. So that tied it at 1-1. This was all part of a 3-goal barrage by the Rangers. They scored 3 goals in a row. They scored 3 goals on 3 shots in the span of 3 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever it was at that point. They chased the starting goalie from the game. You know what's funny about that is that any of us could have put on the goalie pads and we would not have done any worse than Philly's starting goalie. 3 goals on 3 shots, the same thing would have happened to any of us. So that's kind of funny when you think of it like that. But again, it was nice to see the Rangers respond to the early Flyer goal and, take it to them. And obviously the big name players for the Rangers playing like it and then scoring some goals here. You then had the second goal that was scored by Panarin. This one happened later in the game, but we got to talk about it because we never know what point from Panarin is going to be his last. I mean, it's feeling more and more clear that sooner or later, the Rangers will make a move and they will trade him. And I know there's a lot of feelings on that. Emotions are running high about that. Completely understand that. We've discussed it quite a bit. We'll continue to do so moving forward. But we're kind of just breaking down the win here because the fact that the Rangers won a game, they haven't really been doing that a whole lot recently. So we're going to enjoy at least a little bit. But the second goal, this is sort of in garbage time, but then again, not really, because this made it 6-1 in favor of the Rangers. But then it went 6-3 early in the third period, and the Flyers actually started playing hockey in the third period and started to come back a little bit. So it wasn't as much of a garbage time goal as it might have appeared. But bottom line, Lafreniere is along the boards. very short pass of Panarin in the left circle, and Panarin basically just fired it and scored and put the Rangers up 6-1. And like I said, that was one of the more enjoyable aspects of this game. I mean, look, it helped the fact that the Flyers got literally zero goaltending in this game. That obviously helped the Rangers' cause. It also helped that the Flyers in general in this game, at least for the first two periods, they kind of pulled what we've seen from the Rangers over these past couple of seasons, where they just have these stretches where it looks like they just don't really feel like playing hockey all that much. Honestly, I mean, I know the Flyers played better in the third period. The first two periods of this game, it's about as bad, I think, as any Ranger opponent has played against the Rangers this entire season. I mean, they were awful, and the Rangers obviously took advantage of it, so that was great to see. As far as like Panarin and really anybody else on the Rangers, could they be traded before the puck drops on the next game? That's at least possible. The next game is on Monday at 10 p.m. Eastern time. Again, it doesn't really feel like anything is super imminent, but it sounds like the Rangers are now getting phone calls maybe on Braden Schneider, and there's some rumors that they could move him. That could go either way. He's a player we'll discuss in more detail going forward as well. But the three that I really kind of earmarked as far as like these guys really should be traded by the Rangers if they're going to do this, if they're going to rebuild, the big three to me are Panarin and Trocheck and Susie. Panarin and Susie because they're obviously UFAs, and Trocheck because I think you can get an absolute haul for him. And I just don't know that by the time the Rangers are ready to compete again, that he's still going to be like a top-notch player the way that he is right now. I mean, I think by then his trade value may have taken a little bit of a hit. But anyway, bottom line, still awesome to see the Ranger star players, the big name players, the guys that have been there and done that, the guys that have been so important to this team through some deep playoff runs and have led the way for several seasons. It was nice to see them come together, and obviously Panarin chief among that group. So big game for Panarin, and we'll see how much longer this lasts. If you've enjoyed watching Artemi Panarin as a member of the New York Rangers, my best advice, and I've said this in the past, is just try to take this in a little bit because it certainly does feel like it will be ending, sooner or later. We don't know exactly when, but certainly before the trade deadline in early March. But we'll keep everything going in just a second here. I want to shift our attention to Mika Zibanejad and his big night. Obviously, he came through with the hat trick, and talk a little bit about what the future might hold for Mika. And then, like I said, we'll also talk about Brennan Othmann finally getting his first goal and, the potential youth movement that the Rangers could put forth in the coming, days, weeks, and even months here. But we'll get to all that good stuff in just a second. All right, we just want to comment to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Gametime. There is nothing like being near the ice during hockey season. The speed, the hits, the atmosphere. It's unmatched. Watching at home is great, but being in the building is a completely different experience. The only thing that used to get in the way was actually getting the tickets. Long queues, endless screens, and prices changing at checkout. That's why the Gametime app gives the advantage back to fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing NHL tickets and experiences all in just a few taps. Priority fees are included. Know your total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. And the app is incredibly easy to use. Browsing, comparing, and buying tickets only takes minutes. Knowing tickets are backed by the Gametime guarantee gives a real peace of mind. And you can find NHL tickets for as low as $25, making it easy to plan a game night. So take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. All right, we're going to go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Just a huge shout out to the everydayers. As always, thank you guys so much for sticking with this podcast through all the ups and downs of New York Ranger hockey. Thank you for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. And if you haven't already, you got to go check out our new Everydayer Club. There is access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On New York Rangers. It is compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcast app. There's also an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of this show. Go to lockedonpodcasts.com/podcast/Locked On New York Rangers or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. And thank you guys, as always, once again, for making this your first listen. For the Everydayers, going to be back in action on Monday. We'll probably record on Tuesday. The Rangers are going to be back in action on Monday, but we're going to be staying up late for that one. They're at the Ducks on Monday. And so a former Ranger scoring a goal is not a stretch at all. we'll see what happens. But I mean, you got to figure that that's ripe for the taking, given the fact that they're loaded with former Rangers. But also worth pointing out that Mika Zibanejad is finally going to go up against all of his former teammates. That includes Chris Kreider as well. The Ducks are kind of in free fall right now, so this might be a more winnable game for the Rangers than it looks on paper, but we shall see. And speaking of Mika Zibanejad, he comes through with the hat trick in this game. He put the Rangers on top for good when he made it 2-1. Basically, the Flyers were not able to clear the puck. You got JT Miller pouncing on a loose puck. He gets it up to Mika up high in the zone. He basically just shoots and scores through traffic. And at this point, the Rangers had 2 goals on 2 shots. They were well on their way, like we discussed, to getting 3 goals on 3 shots. And then not too long after this, we've got a Ranger power play. This was due to a delay of game on the Flyers. It was due by Johnny Brodzinski bearing down the goalie. Goalie had to basically shoot it up and out of play. Speaking of players that could be traded, Johnny Brodzinski is another. I mean, it's just crazy because you look up and down this roster right now, and it just feels like nobody is safe, or very few players are safe. Like, how many players on this team right now does it feel like there's no chance that they'll be traded? I would say JT Miller. I would say Igor Shesterkin. I would say Adam Fox. I would say Vladislav Gavrikov. Other than that, I mean, well, the young guys. I mean, you're not going to trade Noah Lab, but you're not going to trade Gabe Perreault. I don't think there's any way you would move them. I don't think you would trade Cooley. I think he's probably pretty safe too. But it's crazy how few players like for sure are going to be here after the trade deadline. But I digress. Back to the action here. The Rangers are on the power play and just good passing here. Trocheck to Panarin to Mika. Mika shoots and scores. This gave Mika his 9th 20-goal season as a member of the New York Rangers. And it's funny, you hear some stats like that and you really do start to wonder to yourself, or at least I did, man, are there times where maybe we've been a little bit too tough on Mika Zibanejad? But then you see some of his post-game interviews and some of the things that he says, and you see, certain stretches of hockey where he just looks disinterested or uncompetitive or whatever word you want to use. I mean, last year was just beyond unacceptable, the first half of last season. So it's been a mixed bag with Mika. I think whenever Mika Zibanejad does leave the Rangers, whenever he does hang them up, however that ends up happening, he's one of those players that him and the fans are going to have a very complicated relationship. You're going to have very mixed feelings whenever you think of Mika Zibanejad. I think that's fair to say. And I mean, look, we've been tough on him at times on this podcast. And I mean, there's times where I think it's been warranted. I don't take back anything I've ever said about Mika. There's also times where he's been awesome. And there's been some amazing seasons that he's had, some amazing individual game performances, even some big playoff moments. I know people get on this core for not getting it done in the playoffs, but Mika, believe it or not, does have some big playoff moments as well. The Game 7 game-tying goal against Pittsburgh is one that really comes to mind for me with about 5 minutes to go in that game. So that was obviously huge. But yeah, I mean, bottom line, it's another milestone for Mika. And he ended up also on this goal, same goal here, setting a new New York Ranger team record. He had been in a 3-way tie with Chris Kreider and Camille Henry. But with this power play goal, Mika gets up to 117 career power play goals as a member of the New York Rangers, now stands alone in first all time. So obviously a big congratulations to Mika for that, but he wasn't done there. He also scored to make it 5-1. Turnover by the Flyers in the neutral zone, and you've got Mika to JT Miller, back to Mika, and Mika scores in deep, makes it 5-1. That's the hat trick. And, it just makes me think that Mika and JT Miller should have never been split up, because if you look at basically everything the Rangers have done ever since they traded to get JT Miller back on this team, if you just look at the lay of the land here and you look, okay, when has Mika Zibanejad been at his best since that happened? When has JT Miller been at his best since that happened? There's a very good chance that the two of them are playing on the same line. I feel like one way or another, these two just seem to bring out the best in each other. Last year, it was JT Miller seemingly elevating Mika Zibanejad. This year, it's kind of been the opposite of that. If we could ever get the two of these guys going at the same time, that would obviously be a positive development. But, these are two of the veterans that feel more likely than a lot of the other veterans to be here after the trade deadline. And whether it's the end of this season or the start of next season or whatever it might be, however many years the two of them are both still on the Rangers, I'd really like to see the two of them continue to play together. And I know that, one of the reasons against that is it hurts your center depth, because and that's especially true if Vincent Trocheck ends up getting traded, because if you trade Trocheck, which could happen, and you have Mika and JT on the same line, I mean, what do you even do as far as the rest of the centers are concerned? I mean, you'd probably have Noah Laba centering the second line. Like if Trocheck gets traded this season and he's gone, and you leave Mika and JT together, then it almost has to be Laba centering the second line. I mean, I don't even know who else they would put there. The third line, I mean, your guess is as good as mine. I mean, do you call somebody up from the AHL? Do you bump Carrick from the fourth line to the third line? I would think probably not. I would think you would leave Carrick on the fourth line. Othmann has a little bit of experience at center. I believe they've mixed him in there every now and again with the Hartford Wolfpack, and I think the same can also be said for Brett Berard. But I mean, yeah, you're getting stretched pretty thin, and I understand that. But I mean, the proof is in the pudding. The results from Mika are better when he's with JT Miller. The results for JT Miller are better when he's with Mika Zibanejad. So, if at all possible, I would like to see the two of them stick together for the rest of the season and beyond. But we'll see how the Rangers look to play it. And I also wanted to just read a quote here. This is something that Brennan Othmann had to say about Mika Zibanejad after this most recent game. And we'll talk a little bit more about Othmann in just a second as well. But this is what he had to say about Mika. Because Othmann was asked about his goal and, does it feel good to finally get that out of the way? And do you feel like, more will come now that you got the first one? He was asked about all that good stuff. And this is what Othmann had to say. Mika came up to me in the Seattle game and said not to hang your head and don't worry about it. It's going to come. And a few days later, it came. He was the first one in there after the game and gave me a hug and said, congrats. He's a really good leader. And I'm thankful that we have a guy like that on this team. And if you remember, I believe the Seattle game was the one where Othmann actually hit the post twice. I mean, that was crazy because this guy is just, he'd been close a couple of times. And obviously, the longer it goes and the longer you go without scoring, especially for a guy like Brennan Othmann, who's used to putting the puck in the net at every level of hockey that he's ever been at, I mean, that has to weigh on you. And it is nice to hear him say something like this about Mika Zibanejad, because we've all kind of questioned, the character in that room sometimes and where's the leadership coming from? I mean, I think last year that was certainly a fair question to ask about this core group of players, and specifically the guys that wear letters, Mika Zibanejad included. But it is nice to hear something like this. It just feels like we don't hear a lot of quotes like this coming from the players and the Rangers where they really kind of put over one of their teammates. I mean, you'll hear them occasionally say something, really nice about the goalies and Igor or Quick, whoever it was, they stood on their head and we have to be better than that for them and all this stuff. But I mean, honestly, this is one of the nicest things I've heard a New York Rangers say about one of his teammates, and I don't even know how long. So it's good to hear that. And I mean, hey, again, we've questioned leadership on this team, but at least one player seems to think that Mika, is one of the leaders of this team, and he's going to have to be moving forward, because if the Rangers really do this thing, if they really pull the trigger and they really commit to this, reforming this team, retooling it, rebuilding it, whatever you want to say, then there's not going to be a lot of veterans in there. But Mika will be one of the veterans. And even right now, he's the longest tenured player on this Ranger team. And if guys like Panarin and Trocheck get traded, that's just going to be even more true moving forward. So he's got to be one of the guys that in some way or another, if he's committed to staying here and he doesn't want to waive the no move clause, then he's got to be one of the guys that leads this thing forward for the Rangers. And I'll be honest, I kind of have my doubts about that, but you try to be hopeful every once in a while, right? So hopefully, Mika can play that role if he's going to be here moving forward, but we shall see. Just talking about Othmann, we're going to talk about him some more in just a second, because there's a lot, riding on him and his development and the development of some of these other young players as well. So going to discuss all that in just a second. All right, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about Brennan Othmann and him finally scoring a goal. Let's go ahead and break down this goal here, because this is obviously a long time coming for Brennan Othmann. You got a 3-on-1 for the Rangers, and Cooley is up the left side of the ice. He kind of led the charge up the ice there. Laba's in the center of the ice, and Othmann is on the right side, but Cooley decided to go to his right with the puck to Brennan Othmann, and Othmann had, a pretty good opening there, and he fired it home. And as this play is developing, it kind of felt like he was finally going to get it. Like this felt like a goal as the Rangers were charging into the zone, and Cooley made a great pass, and as it's going over there, you're thinking like, or I was anyway, like this has got to be it. Like, come on, please just put the puck in the net. Just get that first one out of the way finally. But obviously a fun moment here. Othmann was very happy, smiling from ear to ear here. He actually bumped into the referee while he was celebrating his goal, and at this point, it was 3 goals in a minute and 20 seconds for the Rangers, or, whatever it was, somewhere in that ballpark. But yeah, I mean, this is obviously just a fantastic goal here, and obviously very cool for Brennan Othmann. That first that first goal that he scores actually ends up being a KO punch for the opposing goalie. That's always got to feel good too. You score a goal and the opposing goalie is yanked out of the game at that point. But very cool here. And John Giannone mentioned this as well. It was kind of hard to see because the camera angle when Othmann was celebrating his goal and going down the bench, you couldn't really see the faces of players on the Rangers. But John Giannone, during one of the reports from between the benches there, he mentioned that in the last week or two with the Rangers, there haven't been a whole lot of smiles in that dressing room. And really, why should there be? They've been terrible, up until this game. And obviously, they finally got a win here. But the team had been in free fall. They're dead last in the Eastern Conference. There's not a whole lot to be happy about. There's not a whole lot to smile about. But Giannone did mention here that the players on the Rangers are very, very happy here. A lot of guys smiling and obviously very hyped and feeling very good for Brennan Othmann that he finally got the monkey off his back, so to speak, here and got his first goal. And overall, Othmann, I thought, played a pretty nice game. A couple of big hits in this game for Othmann as well. We had a situation where I think it was the third period, if I'm remembering this correctly, but Othmann and Andre ended up getting matching minors. They basically were both cross-checking each other near the team benches, and they were still drawing at each other from the penalty box, and Othmann kind of gave him a thumbs up and going back and forth, barking back and forth. And, you might be skeptical as far as Brennan Othmann at this point on what kind of a player he's going to be and if he'll ever live up to being a first-round pick and if he really has enough offensive prowess to be like a staple in the Rangers top six. And believe me, I'm right there with you because for the most part, I've also been largely underwhelmed by what we've gotten from Brennan Othmann in the NHL. But at the very least, he's got to at least be this dude. He's got to be that guy that, like, if you're on the other team, you just don't like him. You look at him and you want to punch him, right? Everybody needs a player like that. Every team needs a player like that, whether it's the Rangers or anybody else, where somebody looks at him and it's just, I don't like that guy, right? Everybody needs somebody that's a little bit of a bleep, so to speak. You know what I mean? And I feel like the Rangers just don't have enough of those players. And for all the talk coming from Chris Drury and the Rangers in general, that we want to be tougher to play against, that we want to be in your face kind of team and no BS and play with some FU and all this stuff. There really isn't a lot of it. Othmann should be able to deliver that. And I think the longer he goes in the NHL, the more games under his belt, the more he'll feel comfortable playing that role for the Rangers. We saw him get into a fight earlier this season. We saw him get, a goal here, a cross-checking matchup with Andre. It's all good stuff. If at the very least, he should be able to at least play that role for the New York Rangers. And I know, he was taken in the middle of the first round. You certainly want more than that, but at the very least, he should have that unlocked for the New York Rangers. But, it's good to see him get his first goal. And like I said before, it's all what you do in the aftermath of this, right? Because if Brennan Othmann goes another 10 or 15 games without any goals, without any points, then it's going to be like, all right, well, I guess we're right back where we started. But if he can score in the next game or the one after that, you start feeling better about this and you start to think, or at least I do, maybe they can get something out of Brennan Othmann after all. And the really cool thing about this goal for me is that the game before this, it was Gabe Perreault who scored two beautiful goals. And they really were beautiful goals. What was otherwise a nightmare of a game against Ottawa, they were down 6-0. Gabe Perreault ended up scoring twice. I believe the final was like 8-4, but that made it sound closer than it was. But if there was anything to take out of that game, it was Gabe Perreault driving to the net, scoring a couple of beauties from point-blank range. I mean, that was awesome to see. And, you want to see this because if you're going into a rebuild, if you're going to a retool, whatever the Rangers feel like calling it, you want to know that there's some young talent on this team. And frankly, when you look at the pipeline right now, I mean, it doesn't really have the look of a rebuilding team with a lot of young players who are just chomping at the bit and have a ton of long-term upside. I mean, there aren't really a lot of those players. I would say the Ranger prospect with the most upside is the guy we just talked about, Gabe Perreault. And when you look beyond him, I mean, how many prospects do the Rangers have where you look at and say, yeah, that guy, he's a big-time difference maker. He's going to play a big-time prominent role for this Ranger team moving forward. I mean, could Othmann eventually get there? Sure. I guess crazier things have happened. His start in the NHL does not inspire a lot of us to believe that that's going to be the case. Brett Berard, he's somebody that I think he'll be a solid player, but I see him more as a bottom sixer than a top sixer for sure. Scott Morrow, I mean, mixed results at the very least, but I think he's another guy that moving forward, you just kind of allow him to take his lumps the rest of the season. Honestly, I would even put Morrow on the top power play. Adam Fox is out of the lineup. I think Gavrikov has done okay there, better than I think a lot of people would have expected him to, but That's not really what you brought Gavrikov here for. And it was somebody like Scott Morrow. I mean, he's somebody that you can see in that role. I mean, he's not going to take over the top power play for Adam Fox if Fox is healthy, but certainly the second power play, he can handle that. So I would give somebody like him some more run. Who are the other big prospects for this team? I mean, Malcolm Spence, they just drafted him. He seems to be a work in progress. Drew Fortescue, I mean, he's a defenseman that they seem to like, but I don't think anybody really looks at him and sees him as being like a superstar. So you take these small wins anywhere you can get them. Brennan Othmann finally scored in the game before that. Gabe Perreault put on a bit of a show with those two highlight reel goals. But I figure we can pretty much call it there. I mean, the other thing I want to mention real quick here is it was cool seeing Spencer Martin get a win here. I mean, it would have been nicer if they did this for Jonathan Quick. Quick, as we mentioned, has not won a game since the beginning of November. I want to say November 7th. So it's been about 2.5 months since they've gotten this guy a win. And I know Quick hasn't been great in every single start, but it has much less to do with Jonathan Quick than it does with this team as far as why he hasn't gotten a win and as long as he has. But, good for Spencer Martin. Just last year, he did play 9 games with the Carolina Hurricanes. He was also played 31 games in the AHL, 14 games in the KHL. I mean, there had to be a moment where he was wondering if he would ever play another NHL game. And obviously, he started this year with the Pack. He made some really nice saves in this game. He wasn't tested early. The third period, he had to make a couple of really impressive saves. He robbed Konechny a couple of different times, one on a really nice blocker save. And look, I don't think the Rangers could, should, or do have any long-term plans for Spencer Martin, but it is a cool story. It is a feel-good story for him. I'm sure he had to enjoy getting that win there. And look, I mean, if he wants to stick around with the Rangers as, just a veteran depth piece, somebody that would play in the AHL most likely next season, I mean, I don't really have any problem with that. I'm actually going to check his contract status right now. So yeah, that's what I thought. I thought I remember him signing a 2-year deal with the Rangers. So he actually is under contract next season. I would imagine, he'll be part of the Hartford Wolfpack goaltending room for sure next season. It depends, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered because we know Igor's going to be here. We'll start there. Jonathan Quick, it depends. I mean, would he be back on another 1-year deal? That's at least possible. Would the Rangers trade him? Does he want to be traded? He has a 20-team no-trade list. We'll see. Does Quick want to hang him up after this season? And if that's the case, do you put Dylan Garand as the full-time backup goalie for Igor Shesterkin? And if they do that, then, Spencer Martin probably becomes the guy with the Hartford Wolfpack. Or do they put Martin as Igor's backup and they have Dylan Garand continue to get reps in the AHL? If Quick is out of the picture next season, and we'll see which way that goes, my preference would be for Dylan Garand to be on the Ranger roster, to be the backup. I mean, at a certain point, you got to just do this. What is this, like year 4 of Garand with the Hartford Wolfpack, and he's yet to appear in an AHL game? So, we'll see how that goes. But brief tangent over. Bottom line, you find any positives you can in a season like this, and I'm sure that was a very impressive, very feel-good win for Spencer Martin there. But we'll call it there. If you guys want to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @jchick17. Once again, @jchik17. And definitely subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.